Good morning, afternoon, or evening. This is my first video in a series I hope to make involving several of my papers on various political thinkers and political theory in general. The one I'm about to read was written this past fall. I hope you enjoy. If you do, make sure to drop a comment, and if you'd like to see more, please like and subscribe. What are the implications of the claim that, for the oppressed class to be able to emancipate itself, it's necessary that the productive powers already acquired, the existing social relations should no longer be capable of existing side by side? The most stable, efficient, and fruitful mode of production will dictate and govern all those that precede it. First practitioners of agriculture did not abandon their meat-eating tendencies in hunting. Rather, intertwine the productive activities to allow for the production of more humans, labor, and resources. In a reciprocal way, products enable each other like a hungry campfire fueled by wood falling from the sky. As more laborers are created, more labor is required to sustain their numbers. As the wood plummets into flames, more of it is required to maintain its ever-expanding breadth. The life activity of the human falls upon the planet like this wood and reflects back upwards as fumes in the exclusive spirituality and consciousness unlocked by the rational apes. However, these pillars of civilization or beacon-like campfires are dissimilar. Their existences antagonize each other as a result of their differences in their culminated life experiences. Only through time can these piles of spent fuel and roaring infernos blend together. All of the bloody wars that end in the seizure of land and resources, or the beautiful alliances and relationships that allow for the possibility of a sense of homogeneity, where the interacting mountains of labor and their various configurations envelop or destroy one another based on the material conditions that beset them. Marx dictates that in every epoch, the most enriching and fertile form of production will spread through the masses like the inverse of a plague, sheltering the infected and conceiving the process of decay for all those who refuse the productive vaccine. Marx's theory ascertains that a relapsing modernity is inherent in human progression. In common dialogue, these passages of time are tracked through technological or social progress. Additionally, Marx and his analyses exhibit the trend metaphysically. In one excerpt, through the lens of the senses, because the sense of an object for me goes only so far as my senses go, as only sense for a sense is corresponding to that object. For this reason, the sense of the social man are other senses than those of the non-social man. While this quote does not pinpoint or deliberately measure progress, it outlines how the senses have had to constantly adjust with every succeeding mode of production or material condition. Marx's senses were tied to the state of Europe during the first and second rounds of the Industrial Revolution. It is impossible to list all that affects and sculpts the senses within his condition, but the non-social man would live in a world sphere of senses divergent from Marx's, that of humanities in the present. This demonstration creates a clear-cut example of the multiplicity and possibility of human experience. Ultimately, senses of yesterday are similar but changed by the senses of today. In the criticism of political economy, Marx dissects the senses and enlightens the reader in a way comparable to Plato's theory of forms. To know what anything is, one must understand its form. To understand its form, they must sense the object in question in a multitude of ways. From this premise, both theories can then be applied to lived experiences of any human in any age. Furthermore, this synthesis of theories can explain the progression of anything human. True now, the form of the senses, like a leash dog walking itself, senses tend towards felicity, reinvesting in similar sensual experiences researched and chosen by the living censor. The sword cannot guarantee victory and glory from range, so man invented the bow, the crossbow, the musket, rifle, tank, missile, and then the nuclear bomb, which gridlocks the sense of domination and finalizes the form of military might. The independent dog hits a wall and an impenetrable box is placed on top of him, just as the United States and USSR developed their scientific and technological might, creating a mutual existential threat. Each preceding version of the world becomes an exclusively elusive version of the prior. Mythology and religion sense the end of the world through imagination, while the people of the past 100 years or so have sensed it in reality. This difference in perception is materially corroborated in the present by the material misunderstandings between the older and newer generations of today. More than this, it measures the stages in which a mode of production progresses. Capitalism and its prosperous slaves have become the world's largest R&D conducting establishment, an army with the goal of producing the largest number of commodities through the highest profit-inducing manner. Even the richest man, number one capitalist, cannot compare or stand against the massive sum and nature of the totality of capital and production under capitalism. If he were to go his own way, he would find a fate similar to those like the USSR or Communist China, where initial versions of state capitalism would inevitably be incorporated back into the disfigured whole. The richest man or whole nation cannot free himself or itself from the bounds of capital, and, by way, senses, or the conglomerate of a nation's senses, then capital has created a world that cannot exist without it. A parasite that pleases those whom it has most thoroughly taken control of, and those it infects will go to great lengths to ensure its survival, even if such treks are destructive. Modern bourgeois society, with its relations of production, exchange, and of property, a society that has conjured up such gigantic means of production and of exchange, like the sorcerer, who is no longer able to control the powers of the netherworld whom he has called up by his spells. Materially, humanity flourishes and becomes similar under capitalism. Nearly all of the world's people come into contact with its products, therefore sense and become attached to them. Bourgeois society and its productive forces overtook those of the feudal mode, and in doing so enchanted all those it encountered. Consequently, the next mode of production must be able to replicate the same process. Under Marx's logic, the proletariat must then appropriate itself through its own enchantment, just as the early bourgeois did. Proletariat exists in a cocoon that is nurtured and essentially safeguarded by its masters. They permit its existence, as without them their position and existence would be put in jeopardy. Like the capital-infused pioneers that mastered their eventual masters, the bourgeois, monarchs cannot lead the royal lives they did without the food produced by the serfs or the riches and commodities created by their artisans and craftsmen. The capitalist's altered life activity becomes dependent on the proletariat in the same way. The difference between the rule of the monarchs and that of the bourgeois lies in their ability to maintain and suppress the respective repressed class. The first Marxists describe what is supposedly the fate of the bourgeois parallel to that of the monarchy in the Communist Manifesto when they say, "What the bourgeoisie, therefore, produces and appropriates, above all, is its own gravediggers. Its fall and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable." While fiefdoms and feudalism existed for nearly 3 times as long as capitalism has so far, the latter has grasped the entire world and, as described previously, has conquered all of those who attempt to turn away from it. Feudalism permits other ways of life, while capitalism does not. Those that exist outside of its domain are magnetically drawn back in, and in the struggle outside of its field they begin to deteriorate, fall behind, and eventually cease to be relevant to the all-encompassing mass. Capitalism preserves the senses that benefit its existence and neglects or outcasts those that serve another purpose. The proletariat are deterred to sense the experience of laboring for themselves, as this would set them free. All of their personal belongings become marketable commodities valued by fluctuating markets and needs. Our wills get reduced to words and art, and even these are tainted by the ghastly mindbergs floating through the prefix sea of ideas and adherences. All of the senses become fixed and tamed by capitalism. And when capital senses that the proletariat is becoming less docile to its ways, it doubles down on lobotomizing the senses, stalling the transcendence of private property, and disabling the senses from becoming directly in their practice theoreticians. Aspiring gravediggers are lined up and their lives made forfeit by the totalitarian form of production. Marx's words are to become a reality, and communism must be sensed by the proletariat in order for them to understand its form and make it real. It must enlighten the senses enough to create the drive for the proletariat to enchant themselves with the incoming mode of production and way of life. It requires the greatest leap in social, technological, and metaphysical progression. Communism is not likely to fall upon man tomorrow, next week, a year, or even a decade. Capitalism will preserve itself through the inevitable social and political strife, but also the physical changing of the globe. It teeters back and forth between less and more equal conditions between the working class and the landed one. In this Goldilocks zone, the facilitation of growing economies enables the advancement of technological and scientific conditions. Social progress is minimized. Additionally, the generational senses become materially unrecognizable, but as they relate to the relationships between men, they stay rather stagnant. Bourgeois and proletarians are impervious to being appropriated through cultural lenses. The abolishment of their relationship is dependent upon the proletariat possessing the technological capacity to make the relationship irrelevant and inefficient, or the seizing of a widespread understanding among the proletariat that a closer approximation of equality is attainable, and corresponding actions taken to proceed with its realization. To conclude, humanity and the planet have the capacity and resources to comfortably accommodate the world's population several times over. Politics and the massive egotistical and material incentives it creates tempts man in the strongest sense. Glory and the guaranteed wealth it comes with are the apolitical benchmarkers that leave the names of men in the mouths of other men for centuries and millenniums. Man cannot sense more than himself, or less than himself, if he wishes to return to himself. Marx and Engels are two influential and very important writers and figures in world history. Since the Industrial Revolution, the world has changed significantly, and their literature and theory offers an important viewpoint that liberal ideologies often skirt around or completely omit. Quotes in this paper are derived from several of Marx's works, but they were compiled in a book called the Marx-Engels Reader. I don't consider myself to be a Marxist, but attaining knowledge and notes on their works was made much easier by the compilation of texts that is the Marx-Engels Reader. I definitely recommend acquiring one if you're interested in learning about Marxism, socialism, or communism. Thank you for watching, and if you'd like to see more, I will be producing very similar content soon, and suggestions are always welcome in the comment section below.